Oh yeah, yeah. The Redskins are a work in progress. The Giants, it's pretty much a countdown to whenever Daniel Jones starts. They have arguably the best running back in football in Saquon Barkley. The only thing is the Eagles, you never know what you're going to get with them. And the Cowboys are a mess with the whole Zeke Elliott situation. As of today, he flew to Dallas in hopes that an extension will get done, making him one of the highest paid, if not the highest paid running backs in football. And, that may not happen in time for the regular season to start there. So until Zeke comes back, you can't pick the Cowboys to win much of anything. So right now, I think this is Philadelphia's division to lose, but I'm going to go ahead and pick the Cowboys to win the division based on the merit that Zeke's deal gets done, Dak stays healthy, Amari Cooper takes another step forward. They have Randall Cobb, who a lot of people are forgetting about. He was the number one receiver in Green Bay not too long ago, and now he's there. So the Cowboys, with a great defense, can get it together. Then I think they can win the division.
So here's my case for the Eagles, and this is why I think they have a solid case, not just for the division, but one of the teams to lead the NFC overall. I think Carson Wentz was just not himself last year, and I think we're going to see a different guy this season. And if he comes back and plays the way he's capable of, he can elevate this team, because if you really look, the biggest weakness on the Eagles this year is their set of pass catchers. They just don't have a dynamic number one target. With all apologies to Alshon Jeffrey, none of these guys are number ones. I mean, I think Jeffrey is at best the number two. Deshaun Jackson is over the hill. Nelson Aguilar has never shown it. They've got Zach Ertz, but the fact that Zach Ertz might be their best receiver says a lot about the receiving core. And I think that if this guy in Carson Wentz can come back and get back to his ceiling, I think this Eagles team is going to be a real threat in the NFC. Their defense is phenomenal. They had some losses, but really, they're still stacked all across their defense. And I think there's very little to be concerned about on that side of the football. So I think they take it. But I agree with you. The Cowboys are quite good. I just think it comes down to the quarterbacks and the defense. And I trust the Eagles quarterback and I trust their defense just a little bit more than Dallas.
Well, there you go. All right, so moving on to the NFC, I guess, South. I know you had said before the show there's a team you're really high on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think in the NFC South, the team that I really like, and it's a team that I'm honestly quite tempted to pick to make the Super Bowl, is the Atlanta Falcons. I think they're going to take this division, but there's another surprise team in here that I'm also rather high on. And the reason I like the Falcons so much is that I think their defense is going to be a game changer this year. I think offensively we know what they bring. Great offensive line, solid running backs, Devontae Freeman, Ito Smith. They have Julio Jones, who might be the best receiver in football. Sanu and Ripley, I mean, they're just stacked. They have Austin Hooper, who's on Jason's fantasy team, so we know he loves him. But defensively, I think they're going to be a different team this year. Desmond Trufant is an excellent corner. If he can play back to where we would expect him to play this year, that's going to help. Vic Beasley, a guy who can bring a lot of pressure off the edge. They've made some moves. I think they're going to be much better defensively, and I think that translates to them winning the division.
Wow, that's bold. I've been high on Atlanta, and they've let me down before. I think the loss of Tevin Coleman will be bigger than people realize. Devontae Freeman, as good as he is, hasn't shown the ability to stay healthy. So I ultimately think that this is the Saints' division to win here. And you have Drew Brees playing at a high level at his age. You have one of the top running backs in all football. You have the best receiver in Michael Thomas in all football. I know defensively they have a couple holes, but Sean Payton's a heck of a coach. He's been doing this for a long time, and I think the Saints will win the division.
So this is one of the places me and Jason probably have the biggest disagreement, because I have the Saints missing the playoffs entirely. Jason has them winning the division, and the main reason is how we feel about their defense. I don't like their defense one bit. I'm very, very concerned about their defense's ability to play up to the task this year. I think the fact that they're getting Kiko Alonso tells you a bit about their linebacking core, that they feel like he would be an upgrade potentially, and I don't think that's a great sign for them. And offensively, I know this is blasphemous. I'm not sure the Saints are going to be the Saints this year on offense. And part of that is that I could see Drew Brees falling off. I felt like there were signs of it last year. I'm not sure he's pushing the ball down the field the way he used to. And if that continues and they move towards the run game, which we saw last year, His attempts were under 500 attempts, which is still quite a lot, but still. He did throw under 500 passes for the first time, Jason, since 2004. 2004, Jason. That's back when he was in San Diego. And I think that speaks to the fact that this team knows what they have with him. Now, some people will look and they'll say that his average completion went up last year. So in spite of the less passes, he was throwing the ball deep more. But in fact, I think when you really watch these games, he is settling more for some of these shorter throws to running backs and so on. I think if teams pressure the Saints this year, they might find a different Drew Brees back there. I think that makes a difference. And that kind of paves the way for me, Jason, to pick the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to make the playoffs behind Jameis Winston and their new coach, Bruce Arians, who I think is going to really turn this team around. I think Mike Evans and Chris Godwin will both eclipse 1,000 yards receiving. I think Winston's going to have a pretty big year. O.J. Howard's there. I think that offensive line finally starts to gel with the new system that Arians puts in. And I think that it all kind of lines up for them because they have a defense now that really struggled in certain areas. But with a guy like Ndamukong Suh, the secondary that they have, I think there's a chance that they could really have a pretty decent pass rush. They even have Jason Pierre-Paul if he can come back healthy. But ultimately, I think if they can get ahead in these games, which they will with that offense, I think it'll give their defense a chance to kind of pin their ears back, get some sacks, and make life miserable for opposing QBs.
That's a lot to ask for it to come together. I don't trust that organization. I think Bruce Arians came out of retirement just for the sake of wanting to coach again. And as much respect as I have for him, I'm not a believer in Jameis Winston. What was that, 2015, when it was Winston and Mariota, that heralded draft class, and neither of these guys can end up getting, long-term extensions with the teams that drafted them 1 and 2 overall. So Winston has to play his butt off. Same with O.J. Howard. Mike Evans is great. I think Godwin's a pretty good player as well. But they don't have enough at the running back position, with Barber and Royce. I don't think that they're going to get it done. I just don't.
No, and it's absolutely fair. So, I mean, one of the teams we didn't even mention here was the Carolina Panthers, who incidentally picked up one of the better defensive players off of the Buccaneers, which is Gerald McCoy. And we're looking at a team there that I think a lot of people are high on, Jason. It sounds like neither one of us are quite as high on them. What is it about them for you that has you a little nervous?
Oh, the health of Cam Newton. I mean, he is a great player when he's healthy, but what his body's been through the last few years. I mean, they have a great running back in McCaffrey. He was my stealth pick for MVP before I changed my mind, because you really can't have a player on a losing team win the MVP unless he, has an all-world season. So they don't really have much for me. And playing in one of the toughest divisions in football, especially if you think Tampa Bay is going to be that good, there's really just no room for Tampa Bay to succeed.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I do worry about Cam Newton's health. I worry about the offensive line. Frankly, I worry about their pass catchers. I don't think they have a number one option on that team, and I think that makes life tough for Cam. So let's move to our next division, which is the NFC North, Jason. And this was a division that has traditionally been sort of the Packers division. Some injuries to Aaron Rodgers, some kind of lackluster play has opened the door last year. The Bears came roaring back, won 12 games. The Vikings kind of choked down the stretch to miss the playoffs. How do you see it playing out this year?
I think it's Green Bay. I mean, they've had a ton of roster turnover, but they still have that all-important quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, who, getting up there in age is still playing extremely well. Kirk Cousins, that deal in Minnesota is already looking like a really bad deal. Matthew Stafford and the Lions are never going to get out of that NFL purgatory period that they're in, pretty much going nowhere, even with Matt Patricia showing that he can coach in this league. And then you have the Bears primed to take over once Aaron Rodgers, stops playing at this high level with Trubisky at the helm and Khalil Mack there. But ultimately, I mean, Green Bay is Green Bay, and I still think no matter who they surround Aaron Rodgers with, that team just wins. I know last year they struggled, but this year I think they take back the division and go to the playoffs.
Yeah, I think we can kind of cross Detroit off right away, and I completely agree. I have the Packers. I have them for a few reasons. One, I love the offense for this team. Phenomenal offensive line. Most of the teams that I'm talking about that I really like have great offensive lines. I love that about this team. I like their pass catchers quite a bit. I think Devontae Adams is a true number one. Marquez Valdez Scantling, keep that name in the back of your mind. I think he's going to be great as a number two. They have Geronimo Allison and Jimmy Graham. That is a nice little array of pass catchers for Aaron Rodgers, who should be fully healthy this year. That is a big deal. Aaron Jones could have a breakout year. And then defensively, they've added some talent kind of all around. I like what they've done on the back half of their defense. I think that some moves like Adrian Amos and some guys like that can fill in, play well. If they can get ahead in games, which I think they will behind that offense, I think that'll really help them. I think Minnesota and Chicago are solid, but quite simply, I don't trust Mitchell Trubisky. And that's the big difference for me is that I think that if they're down in games, it's going to be a lot harder for them to come back. I don't trust Trubisky to do it for them. And then on the Minnesota side, the same thing kind of applies. I don't trust Cousins. I feel like there's a little regression to the mean for this team on the passing side, especially with the fact that they're going to try and run the ball. I think that means we see less of Adam Thielen. I think we see less of Stephon Diggs. And I think ultimately that might mean better rating numbers for Kirk Cousins, but I'm not sure I trust him to be that guy. And ultimately, I think that might be just enough to kind of doom them. Although this to me is the team that really could be in the playoffs. I wouldn't count them out. I still think this is at least a 500 team. I think that defense is just too good to let them slip too much, but I think the passing efficiency of Aaron Rodgers is just going to be too much in this division. I think he's going to have a major bounce back year.
And we have one division that we haven't covered yet, the NFC West, and we'll start with the defending NFC champions and their new $134 million man. Mid-record here, according to Adam Schefter, who's everywhere, the Rams are signing Jared Goff to a 4-year extension worth $134 million with over $110 million guaranteed, tying him to the Rams through 2024. You have Todd Gurley there. They have a tremendous trio of receivers with Cooper Kupp there coming off the torn ACL. And with Goff under control now for the next 6 seasons, I mean, the Rams could be a perennial Super Bowl contender for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Jason. I mean, you said, I don't know how much more there is to say. They made the Super Bowl last year. They didn't lose a whole heck of a lot. I think they're going to keep a lot of their major pieces. They've got one of the best coaches in the NFL. Enough said. So I completely agree. I think they're going to win the division. I think the rest of the division gets a little bit interesting. What to make of a team like the Seahawks, who still have Russell Wilson, don't have much in the passing game. They've improved their offensive line, which is nice for him. They obviously end up getting Jadeveon Clowney, which is definitely a needle-moving move, Jason. I mean, when you look at this team, the pass rushers of Clowney and Ezekiel Ansah, Ziggy Ansah and Clowney are just going to be beasts on the edge. And with Bobby Wagner there at middle linebacker, I mean, that could be a special defense. So they're going to be fun to watch. I mean, the other two teams are teams that are really on the rise, but I think the question, Jason, is do we think that they can get there this year, or are they still a year away?
I'm going to have to see a lot more from Garoppolo, coming off a torn ACL. I think I said this last week. A lot of people are not touching him, in fantasy football. He did not have the best preseason, but the rust is to be expected. If he could take a leap forward, I love San Francisco's running backs with Breda and Tevin Coleman coming over from Atlanta. I know McKinnon's on IR, but you have George Kittle there, who was one of the best tight ends in football last year. So they have the pieces. And then Arizona, they have to be talked about because they have the number 1 pick in the draft, and Kyler Murray, setting the tone for quarterbacks that are 5'9" or shorter. He's shorter than Russell Wilson and Drew Brees, and he's expected to do big things there as well. So, they're up and coming, but that entire division, I think, can't be ignored.
Yeah, and I actually wouldn't be surprised if the Cardinals end up finishing second in the division in spite of everything we're saying about these other teams, just because I think offensively they have a lot of talent, and I really think if they can spread the ball around a little bit and get the ball out quickly, we could really see this team play pretty well. I mean, they added Michael Crabtree recently. I mean, they have some nice receivers on that team. And then defensively, I think they were a little better than people thought they were last year. They were kind of a middle of the road team, and that's in spite of the fact that really they were built to play with a lead. They were built to play these up tempo type games. Now, what's going to really